Togo, one of Africa's smallest countries, now hosts the continent's newest front in a global contest for power. At the heart of it lies the Port of Lomé, West Africa's fastest growing deepwater hub. In just 5 years, Lomé has climbed to become the fourth busiest container terminal on the continent, serving as a vital trade corridor for landlocked Sahel states. Its strategic value has attracted rival superpowers. The United States is pushing for commercial access and influence through infrastructure investment, while Russia has secured a sweeping defense pact that opens the door for naval deployment and maritime control. China, embedded in the cargo flow through its shipping giant, quietly finances much of the expansion. France, meanwhile, is watching its post-colonial grip on the region unravel. What began as a logistical node has become a geopolitical chessboard. This episode unpacks how a small port became the center of global power politics, how the US and Russia are racing for control, and why what happens in Togo could reshape Africa's future. The transformation of the Port of Lomé feels like something out of a suspense movie. Just 10 years ago, most cargo ships sailed right past Togo. The country was small, the port was shallow, and its neighbors, Ghana, Nigeria, and Ivory Coast, dominated regional trade. But then everything changed. Togo started dredging its port, deepening the waters to 16.6 meters. It installed modern gantry cranes and built a one-stop customs system to speed up cargo processing. These moves caught the attention of global shipping companies. One of them, MSC, the world's largest container carrier, made Lomé the main hub for its African Express line. In a bold move, MSC even sent 24,000 TEU mega ships, some of the biggest in the world, to test if Lomé's new depth could handle them. It did. Today, landlocked countries like Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso rely on Lomé for up to 70% of their imports. For these nations, the port is more than just a shipping point, it's a lifeline. Using Lomé means fewer checkpoints, lower transport costs, and safer routes that avoid insurgent zones in Nigeria and Benin Republic. What began as a simple upgrade has turned into a regional revolution. Lomé is no longer just a port, it's a strategic prize. And while the economic shift is impressive, what's coming next changes everything. The United States is making moves behind the scenes. Washington is not just interested in trade, it's eyeing Lomé for something far more bigger. And that's where the story gets even more interesting. In July 2025, a high-level US diplomat arrived at Lomé's port, walked past rows of towering containers, praising the port as offering unmatched access for American businesses. But this wasn't just a friendly trade visit. It was part of a much bigger plan. The US is shifting from giving aid to building trade. That means removing tariffs that make American goods more expensive in Africa and finding ports that can support military logistics and commercial movement. Lomé fits that vision perfectly. The Pentagon is also watching the coastline closely. US Africa Command, known as AFRICOM, has raised alarms about jihadist groups trying to expand southwards towards the Gulf of Guinea. To counter this threat, the US is offering radar systems, joint naval drills, and private sector storage hubs for everything from food to electronics. It's a strategic move to lock down supply chains while building influence. There's another reason for America's sudden interest. After Niger cancelled its security agreement with the US, American drones and military advisors were left without a base. Now, diplomats are quietly pitching Lomé as the backup plan, a stable deepwater port where US forces could operate if needed. To the public, it all looks like a small commercial pivot, but behind the scenes, Washington is re-establishing itself in a region where it recently lost ground. The US flag is back in West Africa, not just for business, but for control. Still, even this strategic comeback may not match what Russia is doing next. Unlike Washington, Moscow isn't talking too much. It's moving quietly, and its arrival could just be as game-changing. As France pulled its troops out of the Sahel and US influence started to fade, Russia saw a golden opportunity. In early 2025, Moscow signed a defense agreement with Togo that opened the gates to something much bigger. The deal allows Russian warships to dock at Lomé, grants rights for joint military drills, and even offers free medical support for Togolese soldiers, all on Togolese soil. A top Russian official praised Lomé as the busiest seaport in tropical Africa. On the surface, it sounds like a compliment, but analysts say it's a quiet signal that Moscow may be planning something more permanent, possibly a naval base. This isn't just about diplomacy. On the ground, Russian military advisors reportedly from African corps have been seen training Togolese forces to fight jihadist insurgents in the north. At the same time, Russia is selling Togo advanced but affordable military gear, drones, patrol boats, and radar systems. These are the kind of tools that the US often refuses to supply without strict human rights conditions. Russia, on the other hand, doesn't ask as many questions. Moscow's message is clear: we support your sovereignty, and that message is home in a region tired of lectures from former colonial powers. Across West Africa, many see Russia not as a new ruler, but as a partner who doesn't interfere. For now, Russia's presence at Lomé looks firm. It didn't need to invade or bribe, it simply offered what others wouldn't. But even as Moscow tightens its grip, another power is moving more quietly. While all eyes are on flags and fighter jets, China is already moving millions of containers without making a sound. China doesn't talk too much about Lomé, but it doesn't have to. Its presence is written all over the port screens, terminals, and shipping lanes. While Russia makes defense deals and US hosts trade meetings, China builds quietly, but everywhere. Across Africa, Chinese state-backed companies are involved in more than a third of all seaports. West Africa is now one of their key focus areas. In Lomé, China hosts a hidden hand through its stake in MSC's terminal, co-owned by China Merchant Port Holdings. That means every container that moves, every invoice processed, China sees it. It doesn't stop at the water's edge. Chinese loans under the Belt and Road Initiative are funding new dry ports and industrial zones being built north of Lomé. These zones will store, package, and distribute cargo deeper into the region, all under China's watch. But for Beijing, it's not just about goods, it's about information. Controlling cargo means tracking supply chains, learning trade patterns, and gathering data that could help Chinese factories and even military strategies plan ahead. On the streets, the strategy seems to be working. Survey shows that 82% of young Africans view China's role on the continent positively. For many, affordable phones, construction jobs, and working infrastructure speaks louder than US warnings or European lectures. While China keeps a low profile, its influence runs deep. The dragon doesn't roar, it just builds. But the real shift comes when the old power symbols begins to fall, and that moment is closer than most think. Not long ago, France called the Gulf of Guinea its backyard. Its soldiers were stationed across West Africa, from Dakar to Niamey. But today, those troops are packing up and going home. One by one, former colonies have told Paris it's no longer welcome. In July 2025, France handed over its last military bases in Senegal, with officials declaring that regional security is no longer our concern. The exit marks a major shift. For decades, France played a lead role in West African security, patrolling pirate-infested waters and protecting energy routes that power European factories. But with revolutionary leaders taking power in Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso, France's role has collapsed almost overnight. Europe is scrambling to keep influence. The EU has offered €1.2 billion under its Global Gateway initiative, hoping to invest in roads, energy, and digital links. But it struggles to compete with China's massive infrastructure funding or Russia's fast-moving security deals. French and European companies still play a part. They insure nearly half of the ships that dock at Lomé, but their political influence is fast fading. Sahel leaders now accuse France of being the symbol of old colonialism. Protests and speeches call for full independence, not just in politics, but in trade, currency, and defense. France's retreat is more than a military withdrawal. It's a collapse of a system that once shaped the region. And in the space it leaves behind, a new group of leaders is rising. They are not just rejecting foreign control, they are writing their own playbook for power. A new alliance is shaking up West Africa, known as the Alliance of Sahel States. It brings together Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger, three countries now led by young revolutionary leaders who say they are defending their nations from foreign control. At the center is Captain Ibrahim Traoré of Burkina Faso. He and his counterparts see Russia as a sincere ally, sharing intelligence with Togo and exploring ways to export gold and cotton through Lomé, skipping ECOWAS sanctions. On social media, these leaders are hailed as Pan-African champions. From Atlanta to Accra, the diaspora is watching closely. Youth posts like those from Afrobarometer show growing support for a multipolar world where Africa isn't tied to just one superpower, but engages with many on its own terms. Togo, meanwhile, is playing both sides carefully. Togo offers discounted port access to trucks from the AES Bloc, while also keeping trade lanes open for US companies under the AGOA deal. is a small balancing act, but also a risky one. As Sahel countries grow closer and louder, Togo finds itself walking a tightrope between old alliances and new revolutionary forces. And the higher the stakes rise, the harder that balance becomes. Today, Lomé is more than a busy shipping port. It reflects Africa's new era of global competition. The United States offers trade routes and drone support. Russia promises security and weapons. China controls the cargo flow and quietly tracks its debt returns. Europe, meanwhile, is trying to rebrand its presence through soft diplomacy and development funds. Togo's strategy is simple but bold. Accept all offers, balance every relationship, and demand something in return. One day is free cranes and port upgrades from Asia. The next is counter-terrorism support from the West. This juggling act could turn Lomé into a new Dubai of the Gulf of Guinea, connecting Sahel markets to the Atlantic and making Togo a key player in regional trade. But there are risks. Playing both sides could also drag Togo into a proxy conflict it's not prepared for. The more powerful the port becomes, the more foreign interests it must manage. For Africans at home and in the diaspora, the message is clear. Power doesn't only come from picking sides, it comes from negotiating smart, knowing your worth, and turning every attention into leverage. This is Frontline Africa. If you value truth unfiltered and power reframed from an African perspective, subscribe, like, and drop your thoughts in the comments. I am Ezekiel Enegeta. See you in the next one.